Welcome to this tutorial brought to you by River City Graphics. Today I'll be showing you how to color correct your footage in Adobe Premiere. So to get started, we're going to open up Premiere. And here I have a new project, and it's set at 720p, 24 frames per second. So once you create your new project based on your camera settings, you're going to need to import your footage. So basically you will come over to your project window, double click in the open space under Name, and it'll bring up a little box for you to take and import your footage. So I'm just going to start typing in the name of my footage, click on it, and click Open. So now you'll see that it's put it into the project window, and you can take and drag that out by clicking on this little icon here onto your stage to where you can edit it and scrub through it and such. So this is some footage that I shot while I was in LA for VidCon, just panning from our balcony out over LA and some of the pool area and everything that they had there. So you can see here at the beginning I have some of the railing, and it shakes a little bit and then it gets smooth. So I'm just going to take and cut that from the beginning so we have a nice clean pan to work with. And then at the end, when I get there, you can see it starts shaking a little bit as I have to turn the camera off, so, or at least stop recording. So now we have a nice clean pan once we cut that. So basically, once you have your selection tool, you can just come to the end and drag in to trim the beginning and end of clips. So one more thing, I have some audio in here. You guys can't hear it right now because I have the sound turned down on my computer, but basically it's just some LA traffic as well as some wind. So if you guys don't want the sound on your clips, you can right click on your video footage, go to Unlink, and then basically you can select the video and audio separately. So I'm just going to delete the audio. So now we have a nice clean pan over LA with no distracting traffic and everything else. So basically what we're going to do now is I'm just going to take and cut this down so that we can see the video a little bit better. And so now I can still scrub through that, and you can see that if I come up here and we look out on the footage over Los Angeles, you can see that my footage is pretty blue. These buildings are actually white down here, and they look pretty blue in my footage. Now there's a number of reasons why this could happen. Probably something in my camera settings, maybe the white balance was off, or my camera is just capturing light in some odd way. But regardless, I have some blue footage now, and I'm looking for maybe a more realistic, or maybe a little bit more realistic but stylized look to this footage. So we're going to try and get rid of some of the blue and pull it back to more of a real look for what Los Angeles would actually look like. So the way that we're going to do this is by color correcting it. So what we're going to do is to go to our effects. So we can go up to Window, and then we can go down to Effects, and it'll open up Effects. Mine used to be down here, but I pulled it up here so we can see everything. And yours is probably going to look like this. And so what we're looking for is the Video Effects, and you're going to click the little triangle to pull that down. Then you're going to go to Color Correction and click the little triangle to open that up. And here are all of your color correction options, basically. So I'm just going to take and drag up this window so that we can see our footage again. I'm just going to go down to RGB curves, and I'm going to take that and drag it down onto the footage. So now it has added that to the footage. So we can go over to effects controls now and actually edit those settings within the RGB curves. If you don't have the effects controls, you can go up to Window and then go down to effects controls. One point I want to make before we get started is that this curves option here, you can basically click this little triangle to open it up. You may have seen these in other programs. These lines, basically you can drag them to create a curve. You may have seen them in Photoshop for still images. Obviously this is for video and that's for still images, but it works the same way in many programs. So you'll see it in Photoshop, you'll see it in After Effects, I think you'll see it in Final Cut. So by learning curves, you can do a lot of things in a lot of different programs, and it's a great way to fix up your images and give them a nice look. So to get started, basically we have some blue footage. So I'm just going to drag this down so we can get a better look at it again. And so what we're going to do first is try and drag down the blue. And before we do that, I'm just going to give you a little overview on curves. Basically, when you have your master and then you have your red, green, and blue, and the master encompasses all three of those together. So if you want to adjust the red, green, and blue, basically your entire footage at one time, you'll use this one right here. And if you move it towards the left, which if you look at these, there's two triangles. There's the left and the right. So in the left triangle, the closer you move it to that, it's going to make your footage lighter, and the closer you move it to the right, or the farther you move it to the right, the darker your footage is going to get. So that's how that works. As far as the specific colors, the way I like to look at it is, say for the red, the farther to the left you move it, the more red comes into your image, and the farther right you move it, the less red is in there. So that's how I like to look at it for red, green, and blue, and also the master. So you have lighter, darker, more, less, basically, for those halves of the triangles. So basically, now that you guys know that, the way that we're going to remove some of the blue out is by taking and making a point on the blue, and we're just going to move it towards the less, which is the right triangle. So you can see that we can move that down a little bit. It starts to take out some of the blue, but then we start to get a little bit more green in there. So this is kind of a give and take process. Basically, you'll have to play around with it. There's no set specific way. You need to know how curves work, and that allows you to do it, but there's no set way because every image is going to be different, and there's going to be different colors and everything like that. So once we take out a little bit of the blue, we're going to probably need to take and put in some green in order to balance that out a little bit. So now it's pretty green. So what we're going to do in order to get rid of the green is add in a little bit of red. So I'm just going to take and move up the red, and you can see, do you see how that happens there? If I take, and this is what it looked like, and I start to move in the red, and it starts to remove the green. So you'll kind of learn as you go. Like red and green, they work together, and then the blue also, it's kind of the odd one out a little bit, but you can move that around, and the red and the green need to balance each other out pretty well. So if you're adding in some green, you also need to add in some red in order to balance it. Otherwise, it's going to be primarily green or red. So you can take, and you can see that we've got a pretty good effect right here. These buildings are looking a lot more white than they were. So we'll just keep this blue down a little bit. We don't want to take out too much blue, even though blue is primarily the reason that we were color correcting this in the first place. You want to be careful with the blue one and still adjust the red and the green. And it'll give you a pretty good effect. So you can see that what we've done to this footage here, this was like the before. You can see, I'll go back to out over Los Angeles here. This white Macy's building now looks pretty white. So now we can take and go up here to the RGB curves, and if you click this little FX button, this is like the eye icon in Photoshop where you can click that and it'll toggle the effect on and off. So you can see what we had before, how blue that actually was. You may not have realized it before, but once you start taking out some of that blue, it's like, wow, that really made a big difference. So one thing you can do also, I mean, this looks like a pretty good effect right now, but if you want to, for your footage, you can actually take and add a little bit of contrast into it. Normally you would make like an S-curve where you would take the master and you would take and make a point here, and you would take and make a point here to make an S shape, but you can see that doesn't look great for this footage. So I'm only going to be messing with the darker values, so you're going to take one and make it farther down and just move it in just a tad so there's a very slight curve. So you can see that if we take then move that in a little bit, we get a little bit of contrast with that. So it's even more evident if we come down here. You can see that if I take that off, you can see this is what the footage looks like, and then as I put it on, you can see that it brings in a little bit of contrast there. So it helps to bring out the darks a little bit more, and then since it's primarily a bright day, the highlights are already there, so that's why we don't need to adjust that in this footage. But making that S-curve can give your footage some pretty good contrast just by using the curves. So you can see that we have a pretty good effect here. So one thing that I wanted to mention, with these points, you can start putting them pretty much anywhere you want and moving them around. And one thing I didn't know for a long time was how to get rid of the points. So basically you take the points and you grab it and you just pull it off of the graph. So you just take it and yank it off of there, and that's how you remove the points. So if you start getting something that you don't want, you can just take it and pull it off, and then you can make new points where you want them. So I hope you guys learned something with this tutorial. Most footage these days is color corrected. You might not notice it, but a lot of times what you see on TV, what you see in web shows, what you see in movies, is not what they actually shot off of the camera. A lot of it is actually done in post that will actually change the color, because you can get some pretty cool effects. Here I was going for more of a realistic effect just because it was so blue, but a lot of times people maybe move up the blue a little bit or adjust the colors to get that war movie scene effect. Or there's a lot of different color correction things that you can do to your footage. If you add a little bit of blue, it might make it look more this way or that way. It might make it look more like an action movie or something like that. So you just have to play around a little bit with the color in order to get the feel that you're looking for. But I would definitely recommend using the RGB curves to do that, because it's pretty easy to understand, it's pretty easy to get started, and just a little bit of tweaking can give you some pretty good effects. One thing I wanted to mention real quick before I let you guys go is that if you take and right click on your curves, your RGB curves thing that you just created, go to Save Preset, and it'll bring up a box, and you can call it, I don't know, say LA color, and you can just click OK. And then if you go back into your effects panel, all the way at the top here, we can close these up, you'll see there's a presets option here, and basically what we did was saved a preset. So now we have an LA color preset, and instead of dragging out the RGB curves every time, you can just drag this out onto your footage. Now you're probably not going to have LA footage or whatever footage all the time, but if you're doing a show or something where you want consistent color correction, then you can just take this preset, drag it out every time. It's going to be the exact same curves on there. So that's just a little helpful tip to save you some time. So I hope you guys learned something. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and comment, and I will see you next week with a new video tutorial. Thanks for watching.